2025 CSLB Contractors, License Law and Business Questions and Answers, Part 8, by Paint Thinner Gang. These are practice questions. These are not the exact same questions the state will give you. These Q&A will help you pass by studying them. What licenses are required for a home remodel that needs framing, plumbing, painting, drywall, and electrical? C5 license, framing and rough carpentry. For framing work, C36 license, plumbing contractor. For plumbing installations and repairs, C33 license, painting and decorating contractor. For interior and exterior painting, C9 license, drywall contractor. For drywall installation and finishing, C10 license, electrical contractor. For electrical wiring and installations, B general. For framing or being the GC prime contractor, managing the job site. The B general can do everything if they have two other licensees. What can make a business be considered successful? D. Makes profit. A Cal OSHA permit is required for trenches that are or more in depth. B. 5 feet. When an employee quits without warning, when must you pay? A. In 72 hours of quitting, 3 days. What does RMO stand for? RMO stands for Responsible Managing Officer. What is the primary purpose of an RMO or RME? Both serve as the qualifying individual for a contractor's license, demonstrating the necessary experience and expertise required by the licensing board. What is the role of an RMO in a business? An RMO is an officer of a corporation or LLC who qualifies the company for a contractor's license by using their personal license and experience. What is the role of an RME in a business? An RME is an employee, not an officer or owner, who qualifies the company for a contractor's license by providing their expertise and license. Can an RMO or RME actively supervise construction projects? Yes, they are responsible for supervising and managing the construction operations of the business. Who designates an RMO or RME for a contractor's license? The business applying for the contractor's license designates the individual to serve as the RMO or RME. At the end of each month, data are posted from the bookkeeping journals to the B general ledger. What qualifications are required for an RMO or RME? Both must have a valid contractor's license, demonstrate experience in the field, and meet the requirements of the Contractors State License Board, CSLB. Can a single RMO or RME qualify multiple licenses? RMOs can qualify multiple licenses under specific conditions, while RMEs are typically restricted to one employer at a time. Is an RMO required to have ownership in the company they represent? Yes, an RMO must be an officer or owner of the business entity. Is an RME required to have ownership in the company they represent? No. An RME is an employee, not an owner or officer. What is the key difference between an RMO and an RME? An RMO is an officer or owner of the business, while an RME is a salaried employee. Who has more control over the company, an RMO or an RME? An RMO typically has more control due to their ownership or officer role in the company. Can an RMO or RME be held liable for the company's violations? Yes. As the qualifying individual, they share responsibility for ensuring compliance with all laws and regulations. What happens if an RMO or RME leaves the company? The business must notify the licensing board and designate a new qualifying individual within a specified time frame to maintain the license. 90 days. Does an RMO have more authority within the business than an RME? Can an RME have authority over company operations? An RME is responsible for supervising construction operations, but does not have the same managerial or ownership authority as an RMO. Is an RMO considered an employee or an officer? An RMO is an officer or owner of the company, not just an employee. Is an RME always considered an employee? Yes, an RME is strictly an employee, not an officer or owner. Can an RMO qualify for multiple contractor licenses simultaneously? Yes, under specific conditions, an RMO can qualify multiple licenses. Up to 3, but needs to have at least 20% common ownership in all individually. Can an RME qualify for multiple contractor licenses? No, an RME can only qualify one license at a time for a single employer. What happens if the RMO leaves the company? The company must designate a new qualifying individual or risk losing its contractor license. What happens if the RME leaves the company? The company must also designate a new qualifying individual. But since the RME is an employee, the transition typically requires rehiring or reassigning staff. Can an RMO be considered a qualifying individual without daily supervision? Yes, as long as they ensure the company operates within the legal requirements and oversee key aspects of construction operations. Does the RMO have to work a strict hour time frame? No, RMOs do not need to work set hour, but are required to actively run the company with certain tasks. Does an RME have a minimum time requirement to work for the company? Yes, an RME must be a full-time employee, working at least 32 hours per week, or 80% of the business's operational hours. How does the CSLB ensure an RME meets the time requirement? The CSLB may request payroll records, employment contracts, or timesheets to confirm the RME's full-time employment. What happens if an RME fails to meet the time requirements? The company's license may be suspended or revoked if the RME is not sufficiently involved or fails to meet the full-time employment requirements. Are RMOs and RMEs both responsible for the company's compliance? Yes, both are responsible for ensuring compliance with construction laws and regulations, but RMEs are required to be more physically involved in day-to-day operations. Can RMOs or RMEs work part-time for their qualifying role? RMEs cannot work part-time due to the full-time employment requirement. RMOs may have more flexibility, but they must still demonstrate active involvement. What is the primary law regulating asbestos in California? The primary state law is regulated under Cal/OSHA's Asbestos Standard and California Health and Safety Code. What federal laws also apply to asbestos in California? Federal regulations include the Clean Air Act, CAA, Toxic Substances Control Act, TSCA, and Asbestos Hazard Emergency Response Act, AHERA. Who enforces asbestos laws in California? The California Department of Industrial Relations, Cal/OSHA, California Air Resources Board, CARB, and local air quality districts enforce asbestos laws. What is the legal limit of asbestos exposure for workers in California? The limit is 0.1 fibers per cubic centimeter of air, 0.1 F per cubic centimeter, averaged over an 8-hour workday, per Cal/OSHA regulations. Are there specific limits for asbestos in building materials? Yes, materials containing greater than 1% asbestos are classified as asbestos-containing materials, ACM, and are regulated. Can asbestos-containing materials be used in new construction in California? No. California bans the use of asbestos in new construction materials under federal TSCA regulations and state laws. What are the legal requirements for asbestos abatement contractors? Contractors must hold an asbestos abatement contractor license issued by the California Contractors State License Board, CSLB, and be certified by Cal/OSHA. Are property owners required to disclose asbestos in buildings? Yes. Property owners must disclose the presence of asbestos-containing materials, ACMs, during property transactions under California's Health and Safety Code. Is notification required before asbestos removal or demolition? Yes. Contractors must notify the local air quality district and obtain permits before removing or disturbing asbestos materials. Are inspections required before demolition or renovation? Yes. Buildings constructed before 1980 must be inspected by a certified asbestos consultant, CAC, or site surveillance technician, SST, to identify ACMs. What are the penalties for not conducting asbestos inspections? Fines can range from $1,000 to $25,000 per violation, and may include additional penalties for worker or public exposure. What are employers' legal obligations to protect workers from asbestos? Employers must provide protective equipment, conduct air monitoring, and implement regulated areas and work practices to limit exposure. Are employees legally entitled to asbestos exposure training? Yes, employers are required to provide training on asbestos hazards, safety practices, and emergency procedures under Cal/OSHA. How must asbestos waste be disposed of legally in California? Asbestos waste must be properly bagged, labeled as hazardous material, and taken to a state-approved landfill under California Code of Regulations, Title 22. What are the penalties for violating asbestos laws in California? Penalties can include fines of up to $70,000 per violation, suspension of licenses, and criminal charges for negligence leading to public or worker exposure. Is there a limit on the amount of asbestos-containing material, ACM, that can be disturbed without special notification? Yes. Notification is required if the amount of disturbed ACM exceeds 100 square feet, 100 linear feet, or 35 cubic feet. What is the legal threshold for a homeowner to perform asbestos removal on their property? Homeowners can remove small amounts of ACM, less than 100 square feet themselves, but they must follow strict disposal regulations. Can contractors work with asbestos on projects smaller than 100 square feet without notification? Yes. Projects involving less than 100 square feet of ACM may not require notification to local air quality districts, but safety regulations still apply. What happens if the asbestos disturbance exceeds 100 square feet? Contractors must notify the local air quality management district, AQMD, and may need to obtain a permit before beginning work. Are there different rules for friable versus non-friable asbestos materials? Yes, friable asbestos, easily crumbled or airborne, is more strictly regulated, regardless of the square footage. What permits are required for projects involving more than 100 square feet of ACM? Contractors must submit a notification of demolition and renovation to the AQMD at least 10 days in advance of starting the project. Can a general contractor remove ACM for projects exceeding 100 square feet? No. Only certified asbestos abatement contractors can handle projects of this size. Is there a difference in square footage thresholds for public and private properties? No. The 100 square foot rule applies universally, but public buildings and schools are subject to additional federal regulations under AHERA. Must materials be tested for asbestos before demolition if the area is smaller than 100 square feet? Yes. Testing is required for any structure built before 1980, regardless of the square footage involved. How is clearance achieved after asbestos removal in larger projects? A certified asbestos consultant must conduct air monitoring and clearance testing before the site is deemed safe. What protective measures are required for small projects under 100 square feet? Workers or homeowners must wear respirators, use wet methods to minimize dust, and properly contain and label the waste. Can a project be halted if asbestos is discovered after work has started? Yes. If asbestos is found and exceeds the 100 square foot limit, work must stop immediately until a certified contractor addresses the issue. Why is lead a concern in construction? Lead is toxic and can cause severe health issues, including neurological damage, kidney disease, and developmental problems, especially in children and pregnant women. In construction, exposure often occurs during renovations, demolitions, or paint removal in older buildings. What is lead-based paint? Lead-based paint contains more than 0.5% lead by weight, or 1 milligram per square centimeter. It was commonly used in homes and buildings before being banned for residential use in 1978 in the U.S. What federal law regulates lead in construction? The Renovation, Repair, and Painting Rule, RRP, issued by the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, governs lead-safe practices in construction and renovation. What is the threshold for lead exposure in construction under Cal-OSHA? Cal-OSHA's permissible exposure limit, PL, for lead in the workplace is 50 micrograms per cubic meter of air, 50 micrograms per cubic meter, over an 8-hour workday. When is lead testing required in construction? Lead testing is required before disturbing paint or materials in buildings constructed before 1978, as they may contain lead-based paint. Can dry sanding or abrasive blasting be used on lead-based paint? No. Dry sanding or abrasive blasting is prohibited unless it is done in a controlled environment with proper containment. Are there special rules for cleaning up lead dust? Yes. Cleanup must include HEPA vacuuming, wet wiping, and verification of cleanliness using lead dust clearance testing. What are employers' responsibilities under Cal-OSHA for lead in construction? Employers must monitor lead exposure levels, provide training, and supply personal protective equipment, PPE, like respirators and coveralls. Are construction workers entitled to lead exposure training? Yes. Under Cal OSHA, all employees working with lead must receive training on the hazards and proper work practices. Is medical monitoring required for workers exposed to lead? Yes. Medical surveillance is required if workers are exposed to airborne lead above the action level of 30 micrograms per cubic meter for more than 30 days per year. What records must contractors maintain for lead projects? Contractors must keep records of lead testing, training certifications, and lead safe work practices for at least 3 years. Do contractors need certification to work with lead? Yes, contractors must be certified under the EPA's RRP rule and registered with the California Department of Public Health, CDPH, for lead-related work. What are the penalties for violating lead-safe laws in California? Violations can result in fines of up to $37,500 per day per violation under the EPA, and additional state-level penalties. How does lead abatement differ from lead-safe renovation? Lead abatement is a permanent removal of lead hazards, while lead-safe renovation involves controlling and minimizing lead exposure during temporary work. Are lead-safe work practices required for small renovation projects? Yes. Even small projects in pre-1978 buildings must follow lead-safe practices if disturbing more than 6 square feet of interior paint or 20 square feet of exterior paint. What is the purpose of accounting in a business? Accounting tracks, records, and reports financial transactions to provide insights into a business's financial health. What is the difference between cash and accrual accounting? Cash accounting records transactions when cash changes hands, while accrual accounting records them when they are earned or incurred. What are the primary financial statements a business should prepare? The income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow statement. What is the role of a chart of accounts? It organizes financial transactions into categories to ensure accurate reporting. What is double-entry bookkeeping? A system where every financial transaction is recorded in at least 2 accounts, maintaining a balance between debits and credits. Why is a business bank account necessary? To separate personal and business finances, which simplifies tax filing and legal compliance. What types of bank accounts are essential for businesses? A checking account for daily operations and a savings account for reserves. Can a sole proprietor use a personal bank account for business? It's not recommended as it complicates bookkeeping and may impact liability protections. What is a business line of credit? A flexible loan option that allows businesses to borrow money as needed up to a set limit. What is the difference between a business loan and a business credit card? A loan provides a lump sum for specific purposes, while a credit card offers revolving credit for ongoing expenses. What is the difference between tax accounting and financial accounting? Tax accounting focuses on compliance with tax laws, while financial accounting focuses on creating accurate financial statements. What is a tax deduction? An expense that can be subtracted from taxable income to reduce tax liability. Labor costs, wages, salaries, and benefits paid to employees and subcontractors. Materials and supplies, costs of construction materials, tools, and equipment used on projects. Vehicle expenses, fuel, maintenance, insurance, and depreciation of vehicles used for construction activities. Office expenses, rent, utilities, office supplies, and technology costs for managing the business. Depreciation, deduction for the wear and tear of long-term assets like heavy machinery or equipment. Insurance, premiums for general liability, workers' compensation, and business insurance. Permits and licenses, fees paid for permits, inspections, and contractor licensing. Marketing and advertising, costs of promoting the business, such as online ads, brochures, or website maintenance. Travel and meals, travel expenses and meals for business purposes, subject to IRS limits. Education and training, costs of employee training, certifications, and continuing education. What is the purpose of a tax identification number, TIN? It is used by the IRS to identify a business for tax purposes. Are all business expenses tax deductible? No. Only expenses that are ordinary and necessary for the business are deductible. What is a self-employment tax? Taxes that self-employed individuals pay to cover Social Security and Medicare contributions. What is payroll accounting? It involves tracking employee compensation, tax withholdings, and benefits. What taxes must a business withhold from employees? Federal income tax, Social Security, Medicare, and in some cases, state and local taxes. Are independent contractors subject to payroll taxes? No. Businesses do not withhold payroll taxes for contractors. They are responsible for their own taxes. What is a W-2 form? A form provided to employees summarizing their earnings and tax withholdings for the year. What is a 1099 form? A form used to report payments made to independent contractors. Why is cash flow forecasting important? It helps ensure a business has enough liquidity to cover expenses and invest in opportunities. What is the difference between a fixed cost and a variable cost? Fixed costs remain constant regardless of production levels, while variable costs fluctuate with output. How can accounting software help with budgeting? It automates tracking, categorization, and reporting of income and expenses, making budgeting more accurate. What is break-even analysis? It calculates the sales volume needed to cover all costs, resulting in neither profit nor loss.